I'm going to call this PAB meeting to order. I want to mention that Todd could not make it this morning. He fell ill last night due to food poisoning. And so he won't be here. But we do have four members of the PAB present, so we do have a quorum. Everyone, I assume, has received the agenda for this morning. The second item, video of June 9th meeting available, which I should have said September 8th. I apologize. I made an error there. Maybe in the future I'll just say videos available on the website. Our next meeting will be Monday, March 9th. We'll be meeting in this room at 10 a.m. And we have discussed and decided on the meetings for next year. They're all down there under number 4. We had a lot of discussion about the September 14th date. We try to avoid the Chiefs Conference, which occurs, I think, the following week in September in Ocean City. Last September, we sort of conflicted with that date, so we try to avoid it this year. And it also avoids some dates that the Sykesville training folks are making available to the PAB and the ACC the week before. So we was able to squeeze that in, and hopefully everybody can make it on the 14th. If you can't, please let us know. All right. The PAB met in closed session on November the 25th. We had a few issues that sort of were nagging us and you know, getting worse, so we decided we needed to get together and talk about some things. And I went ahead and made a summary, which I sent out, and I think Bethany has provided, of some of the things that we talked about and some of the decisions that we made. And I just want to kind of go over some of the underlined items and make sure that I, you know, give you all a full accounting of what we kind of decided. One of the things, the first thing I think we talked about is we want to try to do some outreach. We found that a lot of people in the county just don't seem to know about the PAB and what our mission is and what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it. So we want to try to inform folks, not necessarily trying to get more complaints against you guys, but we're trying to just inform folks what the PAB is and what it does and how it can help them out and how it can help everybody out. So we're trying to do outreach. One of the things we did, I think we talked about it last time, but we hadn't done it yet, was we rented a booth at the Fall Fest here in Westminster. And we had a good time at the Fall Fest with everybody else. We handed out a lot of our brochures, which we have provided to you guys prior to this meeting. And we talked to a lot of folks, and we feel it was a successful effort. One of the other things we want to try to do is we want to try to get out and we want to try to talk to local groups. We hadn't really decided on how we were going to do that or when we were going to do that or the way forward for doing that. And then we got this request that came in from the American Legion to make a presentation about the PAB, and that sort of got us thinking, well, you know, we need to start being more concerned about this part of our outreach. And so we decided at the last meeting that we were going to reach out to the civic groups, the VFW and the American Legion and the Lions Club and the Rotary, you know, all those civic organizations, and make them aware that that we exist and that we're available for presentations if they would like us to come and speak. This particular task Unfortunately, at the meeting, we did not assign it to anyone. No one volunteered to do it. So we're still looking for somebody on the PAB to work with Bethany to get the letter out and to get this work going. One of the things that we'd like to do is, and one of the things Lisa volunteered to do was to create an outline of talking points. So we deliver the same message to everyone we speak to, and we don't forget to say what we need to say. So, and although we didn't discuss it at the meeting, Todd, who is not here today, volunteered to speak to the American Legion. They're going to let us know in February. The Hampstead American Legion, actually, they're going to let us know in February when they want us up there. Did I cover that pretty good?
Yeah, and I think just to the point of this is, the way we're going at this is working with local law enforcement to improve community policing and really trying to educate the public more about what constitutes a valid complaint so that we try to get to a place where it avoids some of these complaints that really aren't valid complaints, So I think just from your perspective, where our goal was not to get the message out to get more complaints. Our goal was really to get the message out to inform the public properly so that we can hopefully eliminate a lot of the additional complaints that really don't fall under the purview of this process. So
Yeah, it's kind of like how the law is originally set up. The primary data point for us to use is complaints, but we're trying to get away from that and say any type of comments, any type of commendations. And if you you want to file a formal complaint, please be aware that this is what actually constitutes a formal complaint. And this is what will, if so many complaints get dismissed because of this, don't file on frivolous complaints. And here's a list of what will make it frivolous. It's trying to just get generic feedback and other forms of data other than just complaints, because that doesn't, when you get all these complaints, it gets dismissed, it doesn't help anybody.
Thank you, Joe. All right, next topic was the PAB wanted to put a commendation button on the website. We have a button that says complaints, but we don't have a button that says, what went well. And so we proposed to put a commendation button to give good comments, and the county shot us down. They said that we don't allow buttons that say good things. And so we were trying to figure out a way to get around that, and we really haven't found a good way to get around it. And so what we decided to do was Lisa was going to prepare a short paragraph for insertion into the end of the year report, which is due fairly soon. And we're going to let the county know, or let the commissioners know, that we have a concern. I don't think that's going to do any good, but because apparently the lady who is the executive of the county is pretty close to the commissioner. She knows what they like and what they don't like. And so she was the one that made a decision, and but we're still going to put it in there and let them know that we still want a commendation button.
So I drafted a paragraph and I sent it to you this morning for review. And in it, basically, it's not so much getting away. I think perhaps we're getting caught up in the technicality of commendation versus how the county-wide handles that. What we'll probably be requesting is that we have the complaint button, which was already there, but there's just an other feedback section where we can take in various forms of feedback. That could be ideas, it could be any general concerns, or it could just be, positive feedback from an encounter. So I prepared something and I did send it to you, but we may have to get a bit more generic with just other feedback, and hopefully maybe we'll get a bit more success with that.
Right, so what we did additionally was we asked Bethany if we could get approval to create a different button on the website that would maybe just be for comments. If you wanted to reach the PAB with a comment. And so Bethany's working on that, and the button will have a link to the chairman's Carroll County email address, and so they can email the PAB and let them know whatever they want to let us know. Bethany, you got any progress?
Initially, it seems like that might be okay to say, to reach out to the TA with questions, comments, whatever. But that would probably be okay, but I haven't got
Okay. All right.
Again, I think the goal is to improve communication where people have questions. Unfortunately, when somebody is not sure they have a complaint and then they put something in there, you guys know that it becomes a complaint. Then it has to run through this whole entire process. Had they had the information, they would have said, oh, well, never mind then. But then it's too late. So again, I think the goal here is to try to eliminate things that are getting in the process that may not really, maybe the person didn't even intend to have them in the process. But once it enters, right, Tom, you have to follow through the whole process.
Well, and worse is these guys have to spend all that
That
staff
time.
investigating it. That's
Right.
Worse than anything.
Right, so just wanted to put that out
So it
there.
would be nice if we had an alternative to the
Yes.
complaint button, because they could push something else. Okay. So the next issue is the end-of-the-year report. I agreed to compose it this year. Last year, the chairman, Stacy, wrote it. It was a very good report, quite detailed, quite lengthy. I don't know if a lot of people read it, though, it was so long. At least it was hard to get through. So I've decided this year, it's my responsibility to produce it, that I'm going to put it on a diet this year. The county resolution says that the end-of-the-year report has to identify trends and recommendations. That's all it's got to do. It doesn't have to go into a lot of detail. So it probably does need some detail, but we're going to try to make it very succinct this year. And I'm going to try to get it out by the end of the year. I'll send it out for comment when we get it composed. It'll also lay out some goals for 2026. One of the things that we talked about at the ACC meeting with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office people was we're probably going to be putting some statistics into the end of the year report. Things like number of complaints, number of charges, things of that nature. One of the things I asked the Carroll County Sheriff's Office was, well, do you have any statistics that you would like to provide to us that we could embed in this report that might give it a little bit of balance? Rather than say, well, we just had all these complaints, we had all these charges. If we could say something like, yeah, but we had 55,000 encounters with citizens, and this is how many resulted in the complaints. I think something like that might give it more balance in the eyes of the readers. And so I would also encourage the other departments. The Carroll County Sheriff's Office said they was going to send us something. But I would encourage the other departments, if you guys would like to send us something, some statistics you're keeping that you would like to have embedded in the report, please email it to Bethany, and she'll get it to us, and we'll see if we can work it in.
And the basis for that, I mean, in terms of to give guidance, it mainly would be the basis of how many encounters they have per department per year. Would that be, that's a good piece of information. Is there anything else besides that?
Whatever else they may have, I'm not aware of everything that they keep.
Because we can only put data in if we get data from everybody, right? Because we're not going to put data in from two departments if we don't have it for the others. So if we could ask for a few specific things, probably that might be helpful. Or
Yeah, we could, but I was just asking for whatever that they would like to share. If some of them don't want to share anything, we could just compartmentalize, some of it and make it germane,
But so the point is to provide context to the reader, correct, on the extent of whatever is a complaint or whatever.
yes, that's what I was thinking. Any questions from
And
anyone?
I think what really the goal is to identify trends and find ways to improve community policing through this partnership. So if you guys are seeing any trends that are, improving your process or helping, that would be helpful too. I mean, I think we continue to see the trend of courteousness, right? And then where people feel like the officer's rude and all that are generating complaints that aren't, because they become unfounded because they're not any particular violation of policy or any of the things that would fall under the process, but they're generating these complaints. So that's the trend I think we've noticed in here. Any way we can communicate that to the officers is, and I know it's a difficult job. I mean, I feel you guys. I would be as frustrated as you are, but to professionalism while you're doing this job, anything you can do to help communicate that message to the rank and file would probably help all of us.
Thank you, Ian.
No, just mirror what Ian said. That is the trend, the one trend we've noticed with the nearly 90% of complaints that are dismissed as exonerated or unfounded. The vast majority of them are because the officer was rude. And while there was no actual policy violation, that's what triggered the complaint. So, but that's really the major trend that's come out of this year, I think, is the vast majority of the complaints are getting dismissed, but they're getting filed because of rude behavior.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. All right, so PAB has talked about updating the Carroll County resolution that created the PAB and the ACC. And one of the things we want to do is we want to change the terms of the members from 2 years to 3 years. We mentioned it in the report last year that it's difficult to get people to serve on these boards. And also, by the time you get them up and trained, a year has gone by and they only got a year left. So one of the things we want to do is try to update the resolution to allow for 3-year terms. And so we decided in February, possibly if we can get before the commissioners, we're going to, maybe Tom and I will go before the commissioners, talk about the end of the year report, and also ask them if we can amend the resolution to 3 years. So we'll see what happens, but that's our plan. Did I get that? Okay. Moving right along.
Unfortunately, that'll be for subsequent members.
What are you trying to see?
Moving right along, we talked about setting the dates. And then, of course, one of the things the PAB is charged with is reviewing the outcomes of the ACC cases. And we've been discussing those at 9 o'clock. That's probably why we're coming in a little bit late, is we're upstairs discussing those ACC cases before we come down for the 10 o'clock meeting. But we go ahead and we're handling that in accordance with our mandate. And we just got through doing that earlier this morning. All right, so talked about session, talked about, I also want to address some changes to the time limits that is now occurred as of October 1st as a result of a new law that was passed by the legislature and signed into law by Governor Moore on May 13th. The ACC has, and law enforcement has some new time limits that they're required to keep in mind when they investigate cases. I provided a handout to you all down here at the bottom of page 1. Looks like number 1. The investigation unit shall complete its investigation and forward its findings to the ACC within 334 days after filing of the complaint by a member of the public. So prior to this new change in the law, there was no time limit. It just said immediately or as soon as you can. Now there is a time limit. I think some jurisdictions were sort of, the reason why this came about was some jurisdictions were maybe holding on to the cases until at the end of the time period that the ACC had a year to hear them. They would just hold on to them until they got pretty close to the time limit, and then the ACC didn't have enough time and their authority expired. So now they fixed that. Looks like 334 days, that's about 11 months, I think. That gives the investigating authority the time that they have to have that investigated, completed, and provided to the ACC. And then on page 2, I don't know if this is much of a change, but it charges the ACC with reviewing the investigation and giving a finding within 30 days. So after that, the ACC has 30 days to either make a finding, or I think they can send it back for further information. And then they extended, it used to be a year and a day for the whole process to take place. Now they've given us 395 days, which is, it's either 365 in a year, so that's now 13 months that the whole process has to play out. So we're much more, looks like it's much more strict on the timeframes we have to follow now than we had before. So please keep that in mind when you're completing your investigations. One of the things in this new law that I thought was kind of interesting, that really doesn't pertain to the ACC, but it sort of pertains to law enforcement. And I don't know if we have paid much attention to this, or if we have to pay much attention to it, but I want to just point it out just because it's there. And you could see under page 2, under C, or at the bottom of that paragraph, it's underlined. And it basically says, and I kind of read it, except as provided in this section, a law enforcement agency shall file any administrative charges arising out of an investigation of alleged police officer misconduct that is not required to be reviewed by the ACC within a year and a day after the date that the appropriate official employed by the law enforcement agency, as determined, and this is the germane part, as determined by written policy of the law enforcement agency, became aware of the incident. So it's telling me that if you guys have an officer that, you know, he's engaged in misconduct, but it doesn't fall to the ACC, that you have a year and a day to take action on it. But it also says, and I think, again, the important part of this is as determined by written policy of the law enforcement agency. So it requires you all, I would encourage you to read this section, it requires you all to have a written policy on this part of the law. So please keep in mind the fact that you got to have something written in your policy that deals with this. Okay. Any questions?
So, Tom, do you expect more changes to this? Because I think there's some jurisdictions that are far behind these, right?
We've only had, since it started, we only had one case that bumped up against the limit. In most cases, the time limit's not really been an issue here.
Not here. I'm talking about like in Baltimore City, where there's no way they could ever achieve
They
this.
got more
Right.
Yeah, that's a different animal.
So I wonder if they're going to do like a carve out for them, or if they're just going to, or if this thing's going to change more. I don't know, but
I wish I could answer, but I don't know.
yeah. So something to think about. Thankfully, we're not in that position.
I know that the Fraternal Order of Police is working with some others at the legislature with trying to amend the law again. Because there are some things in the law that cause us some concern and the departments some concern, especially the fact that if an officer is charged, it never goes away. And so we want to try to fix that. There needs to
Right.
be some sort of expungement procedure for when you're not charged, and even maybe when you are charged. So there is some work going on, Ian, at the legislative level. Well, there's
Right.
nothing we can do about it.
Right. And then again, that's why we're trying to follow whatever we can from the mandate that we have so that we don't run into what Joe's brought up in the past where legislature feels like they need to enact more, so we're trying to do the best we can with what we got.
Okay. Any comments? No comments? Okay. All right, so next on the agenda, I just want to mention that we have an upcoming Maryland State Police Trial Board case. I believe it's scheduled for January the 29th. Bethany, do you know anything more about that? Did you give them a room, or do we know where it's at?
I believe it's at Carroll Community College.
It's at the community college?
I believe so, yeah. All right. I believe they went to Carroll Community College to get a room because we didn't have any available for the dates they needed.
Okay, so who do we contact to find out the time and the location? Do we,
I can reach out to the
to the state
state
police?
police liaison.
That, what's his name?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Arthur or somebody like that, okay. So we'll try to, that's coming up pretty soon. We'll try to get some more information on it and send it out to you, in case you want to attend. And we may have another one, depending on what happens in our local agencies here in Carroll County. Okay. Tom, I think we're ready for the update from the ACC.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try not to go into lots of detail because it'll take so long. So, most of you are probably somewhat familiar with these cases because they involved your various agencies, but I'll just give some highlights. This is over the last 3 months, September, October, and November. We had a total of 20 cases. And out of the 20 cases, there were 2 officers charged. And one of those cases is still pending, so it's not been totally resolved at this point, and I'll leave it at that. In September, the cases involved, Westminster had 7 cases, and Tawnytown had 1 case. And in October, there were a total of 7 cases. And in that month, it was Westminster, 1 Carroll County, 4 Hampstead. 1 Westminster officer was charged with failure to activate body camera. The other case, because it's not been finalized, I don't really want to speak about it publicly because it's still pending, so meaning it could go to a trial board, so I'll leave it at that. In the month of November, we had 5 cases. We had 2 Carroll County. We had 2 Westminster and 1 Sykesville. The thing about Sykesville is because of the rank of the officer, they asked the county to investigate the case for them. They did a very thorough job, and we were able to put that case to bed. But it's some of the things that were talked about. I just want to follow up something Bill said about the training. So 2-year terms, when I came on the board, I didn't even get trained for 5 months after. So I couldn't function. In fact, none of the members could function at all. So we were really almost 6 months late in getting started. And now it's kind of like onto a schedule where the state trains twice a year. So the takeaway from that is you have to kind of like know who's coming off the board so you can identify who's going to fill that spot to get them into the training. I think next year, I believe it's March and August is the training for ACC members. We also made an adjustment that says that your term doesn't begin until you're qualified till you're qualified. So meaning that wait time doesn't count. It's not so bad now as it was in the beginning. I think now most people, maybe you have to wait 3 months, and some of the other ones 3 months, but it's a little bit better. But I think overall, having 3-year terms with the term limits still being 2 terms is a good compromise. It's a lot of work. I don't think that, you guys put a lot of work into the investigations. I mean, that's the part that I think that people don't always understand, is that you get a complaint, and sometimes, you probably will acknowledge this, the person that complained, you can't get them on the phone again. That they don't even want to talk to the agency that's doing the investigation. Or, once you do have contact with them, and they see the video, they agree that it probably wasn't a valid complaint in the first place. We see that a lot. But when that investigation is triggered, just imagine how much manpower effort you put into it. It's a lot. And I think that's the part about the complaints that's really important to recognize, is that it may not be valid, but it still generates a workload for the police agencies, that they could be doing other things than investigating a complaint that the person doesn't even want to talk to you about. We just had one recently where they were trying to knock on the person's door, they wouldn't answer the door. It was really kind of sad what happened, but that does occur sometimes. But just to hit a couple of the cases that are somewhat interesting and kind of different. We had a complaint from one agency that involved a complaint that came from out of state. The officer was off duty, and the officer lived outside the state and had a complaint against him, because this officer was a baseball coach, and doing his job as a father, a parent, and a coach, he tried to mitigate a situation that could have got out of hand. He didn't identify himself as a police officer, but the lady found out that he was, made a complaint, and it was a case that we've never really had anything like it before. We get a lot of cases that, I think racial profiling is a very serious situation, but we get a lot of these cases that come up, and they don't meet that test. For example, we were having this discussion earlier. A police officer is working at midnight and sees a car, go through a red signal, pulls them over, and the complaint comes and gets a ticket. Complaint comes back to us that it's racial profiling, and the person couldn't have known the race of the driver. Yeah, if it's a legitimate racial profiling, that's a very serious thing, but that's something that we see, quite often. It's one of the trends. We had in one of the jurisdictions, like I said, without going into detail, very serious situation that's still pending. It'll probably go to trial board. The way the trial board process works is we've only had one case so far that went to a trial board, and the trial board process is de novo. It starts new. None of what we decide as the ACC matters. You kind of approach it like you would a court proceeding. Thank God we don't have a lot of them, but there's a lot of work. But we do have one probably coming up. I see the chief there shaking his head. So we have that, but the other thing we found that, this is probably not a surprise to you guys, is that we have agencies that pick up people that have arrest warrants against them. And sometimes those people they're going after are not here in this county, they're someplace else. And we had that happen with the county agency, that they were trying to apprehend a person that had an arrest warrant that was down in Baltimore County. So then they have to go out of the county, coordinate with that agency to do what it is they have to do, and that generates complaints that we have to deal with. Now, I think the person's in jail still, but some of these things are pretty amazing and what happens. And I think to the point Ian made earlier, if you're pulled over for speeding and there's radar that shows that you were speeding, then at least from the factual evidence, you were probably speeding. Now, you have a right to go to court, you have a right to defend yourself, but oftentimes what happens isn't the speeding generates a complaint, it's maybe the way the officer comes across. Some officers, from the experience of watching these videos, have their style that might be different than maybe the chief's, had he made that stop. And the attitude of the officer is really critical, really important as they face the public and deal with the public. I don't know how you train that or emphasize it, but it is something that we see quite often. And sometimes it's the same officers that you see that generate a lot of complaints. I think the work they're doing is great, but maybe they could approach that part a little bit differently. So that's kind of an overview. I know from my experience and now being on this for a few years that being a police officer is a very difficult job. And what you guys do as far as, and your officers and men and women do, in terms of the overall number of encounters, I'm sure that you have to report that stuff to the state, how many traffic stops you make, et cetera. It's in the thousands, probably in the hundreds of thousands if you add them all up. And you think that in 3 months out of all those encounters, only 20 complaints were generated. It shows that I think the public has strong support for our police agencies, but this process is something that will continue to evolve, and hopefully, we have good cooperation. I think we do with the agencies, and I really appreciate it on behalf of the ACC that we get good professional investigations and we get the information we need to make good decisions, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, I think the bill maintains a what do you call that, tracker? Log. So at the end of the year, that'll be part of the report as an attachment. So you'll see all the different cases and things like that. You can always ask, but.
Yeah, we keep a log, and I have provided it before. I kind of decided maybe just give it to you at the end of the year or the beginning of the first meeting of the year, which kind of covers what happened the following year, might be good enough, unless you want to see it more often. Like, we could give you one every 3 months if you want. Just let us know.
Just one final thing. The other change we made in the decisions that come out, because each agency has to have a victim's rights advocate. When that decision now says, if you have any questions, issues with that, just contact the person there. And that person in the agency is responsible for providing feedback to the complainant. I think it's working pretty well. I don't think we've had much. What was happening before is the complaint would end up calling Bethany. And she didn't do the investigation, doesn't know any of the background, would end up having to call you guys anyhow. So now it's, I think, working. Wouldn't you agree, Beth, it's working better? Okay. Perfect. Okay, so thank you.
I personally think it's better to get them quarterly, just so you know, especially with the other officers, you guys see what's going on in other departments. And then if the same incident arises or some other stuff, I just think it's better for everybody to be on the same page as you're going along. Because that's our plan, is to get
Lisa,
them
you want
quarterly.
to see it quarterly?
Yes.
You all want it quarterly? Okay.
Be a little too much to review. You're going to get that at the end of the year. Again, when it's a whole bunch, I think people tend to be like, yeah, that's too much. If you're getting it quarterly, we can keep
Okay.
up.
Quarterly it is. Thank you, Tom. Anything else? All right, next on the agenda is updates from the law enforcement agencies. I don't see the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, so I guess we'll move on to Westminster.
Good afternoon. I was hoping somebody else would go first so I could kind of play off of them, but that's fine. So, this is my second one, so I think we're doing well. You know, I appreciate the work that you guys did this last quarter. Obviously, it was kind of a high quarter for us. We had 7 complaints, but I think you can see that the majority of them were exonerated, and the one that was sustained was not really part of the complaint. It was just a policy violation. Forgot to turn on his camera. You know, and I understand what you're talking about when you say the traffic stops and the way that the officers carry themselves, and you know that could probably help us curtail some of these frivolous complaints. You know, I think what you do see is when you see the same officers over and over again, those are officers that are very productive officers and have more citizen contacts. So they tend to generate more complaints because they're engaging with more people. But that being said, you know, we've had a couple of conversations with a couple of those officers and asked them to, you know, look, you're not violating any policy, but you might be coming across a little curt or matter of fact. So trying to work on that aspect of it so that they understand too that, you know, we don't want their names to be coming up over and over again, even though they're out there doing a good job. So we are working on that at the Westminster Police Department, identifying the same patterns and trends that you all might be seeing, and obviously trying to have those conversations and open communication with the officers on how we can maybe improve and not get some of these frivolous complaints that we come through, because they are time consuming. You know, it goes to internal affairs and have to investigate them, have to put a lot of resources into some of these complaints. Other than that, I provided you all with the Westminster Police Department. I tried to color code it to make it a little bit easier, break it out by quarters and things of that nature. So obviously, if there's any questions there, please let me know. And as far as the end of year report, I think that is something from the Westminster Police Department's perspective that we can work on and get you the calls for service that we've had, or the engagements and how many contacts Westminster PD's had during the year. And I think that will show that, you know, the number of contacts that we have versus the number of complaints is a very low percentage.
Do you break out car stops?
We do. We can, that's easily tracked, usually through ACRES, the state system. We can pull the numbers, but we do track it. So I think that will show you that, you know, we have tens of thousands of traffic stops a year, and we got 20 complaints out of maybe 10,000 traffic stops. So I think that would, you know, obviously give you a very low percentage.
Great. Thank you, Chief. One of the things you said was you recognize that there's, you have some officers that seem to garner more complaints than others. And of course, one of the reasons is they're out there working harder. But you also indicated that you may offer them some different ways of doing things. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Just guidance, you know, just having that conversation with them, saying, hey, look, you know, this is probably why they thought that you were coming across what they call rude. It's just a matter of fact. He's just very by the book and by the facts. And some people don't take to that sometimes. They want more explanation, or they actually want to debate with the officers on the scene about the traffic stop themselves, and they don't debate it. They're just like, here's your citation. This is what I wrote you for. You can contest it in a court of law. And some people see that as coming across rude or curt or whatever it may be, when they're not going to sit there and debate it with them. So what we'd like to do is sit down with them and say, hey, look, you know, you've gotten 2 complaints this quarter, or whatever it may be. We have our early identification system process that we go through. And that's just a meeting and saying, you know, everybody on this board has over 30 years of experience. And I think with experience comes the knowledge of maybe how to better talk or explain the traffic stop instead of just being so matter of fact, and just trying to show them the ways. Now, they're not violating any type of policy. They're actually out there doing great police work. But, you know, I think with age comes that tact that maybe can leave everybody leaving. Well, they're going to leave with a citation. They're still not going to be happy, but at least maybe they don't think the officer's being rude, so to speak.
You know, the PAB and the ACC appreciate very much the discussions that we have with you over these cases at the ACC meetings. And some of the things that we talk about don't go much past the room, but it is heartening to know that when we do have officers, and I know you've got at least one, who tends to appear in front of the ACC a lot more frequently, that you guys are doing things at the department level that are meant to address the issue. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we appreciate the feedback. That lets us know that, you know, we might have some conversations that need to be had. But, yeah, you know, obviously we want to provide the highest quality of service to the community. And some of the feedback that we do get from your members in the ACC helps us do that.
Thank you. And we appreciate your report. Very, very good.
So, Bill, this is the chief's first official meeting. so
Yep, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Welcome and congratulations on the appointment.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And we plan to mention, you know, some of that and as we go along in our reports, you know, the fact that although these cases sometimes are listed as exonerated, there's definitely a trend of where the departments are doing a better job on just going over professionalism and courteousness with the officers and as a regular process.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of got me thinking in that direction is I was looking at your report, and under the second section, arrest, detention, search, review, the ADS review number 2514, where you were dealing with a warrantless search as a result of a canine traffic stop, it looks like you offered some remedial training. So, you know, we appreciate that kind of effort on the part of the departments very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so next in line is Mr. Chief Sykesville.
Good morning, everyone. This past quarter was relatively unusual for us because we had 2 complaints, as Tom alluded to. One was investigated by the sheriff's office and determined to be no administrative charges. So I'd like to thank the sheriff for his help with that one. We did get a second complaint, which is being actively investigated by the sheriff's office, that hasn't reached the ACC yet. So relatively unusual for us. We've gone whole years without a complaint, but this past quarter we got 2. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I think the one complaint I was mentioning, I believe when the complainant did see the body cam video, it was like, oh, that's not what I heard.
Right.
Kind of eye-opening.
Sure. Yeah, I'd offered that same complainant, and she accepted the ability to come in to view that video with me, and still, you know, did not withdraw the complaint. Of course, there's really no procedure for that now, so we still had to go through the motions, but it was pretty clear from very early on that it wasn't an actual sustained complaint. But
I think in that case, the kids maybe were not truthful as to what really was going on, and the mother got upset.
imagine that. No, but if I could just touch base on this whole issue of the rude and discourteous, you know, in my 40 years, that has been probably the #1 complaint that we've investigated, you know, over the past 40 years. And that's because it's a catch-all complaint. There's a big difference between being professional and being rude and discourteous. And being professional, it doesn't always mean being friendly, being officer-friendly, and engaging, and like Chief Price said, additional conversation. You know, we in fact teach our officers to limit conversation. Why? Because the more conversation you have with the violator, the more chance there is for a complaint. So it's just the way it is. You know, it'll never change. I wouldn't call it a trend unless you want to say it's a trend for the past 40-plus years, but it's something we deal with. And again, it's training our officers to try to be more personable without going over the line and having too much of a conversation with a violator that's not necessary.
Well, it's definitely a trend in generating these complaints. Obviously, you guys been dealing with this stuff for years, but now this has come to this process, you know, so now we're getting to, and that's what they're telling us, to identify trends and ways to improve law enforcement, right? Working together with you guys. So obviously this is an opportunity for all of us, right? To bring this out in the light and then to say, okay, we are working on it. And, you know, you can always say, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can bring it up in court. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Have a great day. You know, and that kind of stuff. It's just sometimes, and I know Tom sees it on the videos, sometimes it's the small things, right? And it gets hard. Believe me, I feel you. If I was one of these officers, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be doing the same thing sometimes. And day after day, incident after incident, oh my God, it gets hard. So I think we personally identify with how difficult this must be. But if you can get it into a habit, you know, habits take a while to develop. And I think with what you said, when you're having these conversations over and over again, the habits will start to form. And you can courteously dispense justice, right? I mean, I think there's a way to do it.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
Okay, Tawnytown.
Good morning, Chairman Wade, board members. I have to agree with Chief Price and Chief Ball. A lot of times it's not the message, it's the delivery. And it all depends on how you come across to people a lot of times. And unfortunately, most of the time, nothing they're saying is rude. It's just they perceive it as being rude. We've been last few months, we've been relatively lucky, I guess, because we haven't had that many complaints. And the one complaint that Tom mentioned, the one out of state, was theirs. And it's a different situation where you're dealing with something like that.
We never had anything like that.
No. And number one, it was out of state. Number two, the officer was off duty. But he had to step into a situation that could have got a lot worse if he hadn't. So I thought it was handled very well. And of course, we appreciate your efforts, and we will continue to appreciate your efforts with all you help us with. Because we really didn't know at that time whether it even should be reported to you folks. So the guidance is very much appreciated.
So I have a question, if it's okay to ask about. Does that fall under, since this is a new process, you know, in a different city for a couple of years, that type of complaint, even out of state, still falls under the ACC and the PAB?
Well, I can't speak for the PAB, but when the question came to me, of course, I consulted the county attorney, and between the two of us reading the law, we determined that in this case it did. I think you have to look at the facts of each case if something like that happens, but.
Because the former jurisdiction that I worked at, we bordered DC. And a lot of times, there would be crossover into DC, and when an incident occurred in DC, it did not fall under the jurisdiction of the ACC or anything. It was actually because it was out of state. So that's why I'm asking. So I don't know if there's any clarity.
Chief,
I mean, because it was very unusual, but, like I said, you know, I sought the advice of counsel, and I took that advice and said, yeah, I think, Chief, I don't like having to tell you this, but in our determination, this would fall under our jurisdiction. So, we looked at the facts and looked at the situation and determined that, you know, there was no violation.
And,
Yeah.
and the complainant found out our officer where he worked, and she filed a complaint with our agency. So it was a, you know, it was a
Okay,
citizen.
yeah,
it
it's
was
a
a
unique situation.
Yes, and it was a citizen complaint directly to our agency.
And I think we all have a great relationship here that we can figure out those type of incidents.
Yeah, I think if you have something like that come up, I think you do just what the chief did up in Tonytown, just call up and say, hey, we got this situation, what do you think? And I know I'll try to give you the best answer I can, not just giving you an answer. I'll speak with Mr. Burke, and even if I had to go down to the state and ask them for feedback, we would try to give you the right answer.
I agree.
And I think Mr. Burke looks like he wants to say something.
Yeah, sure.
I think what was a little unusual about that case, even though it was out of state, the allegation was made, even though it was probably unfounded, that this officer was saying, hey, he made a point of saying, hey, I'm a cop in such and such a jurisdiction, and turns out he didn't say anything like that at all, but that's sort of how it was tied into his service on the local police department. And it was a complaint we received, to the commission, and we acted on it. So I think you're right. In some cases, the facts won't justify us hearing a case like that, but in this case, the officer was said to have identified himself and sort of thrown his weight around. Even though it was unfounded, that was sort of the hook that we got, I think, Tom.
And when you found out, the facts were that there was some, marital issues involved, and the person in the middle is this poor kid that just wants to play baseball. And, there was no testimony. Of course, there was no body cam, nothing like that, but there was no testimony that showed in any way, shape, or form that this individual identified himself as a police officer. Somehow this lady found out, maybe from someone else there, maybe somebody else said he was a police officer. That's probably what happened, and that's how the whole process started. Wouldn't you agree, Chief?
Yes, sir. Matter of fact, that's exactly what happened. She found out from another party that he was a police officer.
But I really admired what the guy was able to mitigate the situation, where there was nobody hurt, nobody arrested by the local agency. And, but, there was, around kids, I've heard all the profanity in the world, so it doesn't offend me, but small kids, they don't need to hear that,
And Chief Price, I think what this issue boiled down to was, according to state law and all the policies, a police officer has to conduct himself appropriately, whether he is on duty or off duty, and whether he is in the state of Maryland or whether he is not in the state of Maryland. And so I think this one boiled down to, did he act appropriately when he was up there off duty in Pennsylvania? And we found that he did. He acted appropriately.
And I understand that, and it's probably, I think most of the incidents that I'm talking about were probably on-duty things that occur in the line of duty, so, thank you,
Yeah, there was no doubt that he had no police powers up in Pennsylvania whatsoever. And that's kind of like, what confused the issue, whether he was acting as a police officer or not. All right, any other questions about that one?
Thank you, folks. We appreciate it.
All right. Chief Snyder from Hampstead.
Good morning, everybody. Pretty much I would start out by saying ditto from what you've heard. As far as some of the complaints relative to rudeness, the way we interact with people, I think it's much more complicated than we give it credit to be. A lot of it is generational. A lot of it has to do with just the way people communicate. We've talked about it before. Some of our younger officers, and as Chris said, we're all old people here, communicate with people a little bit differently. This is the preferred method, right? Text, email, whatever. It annoys me that I get text different times from people, including my wife, where, hey, a phone call, all right, would be a lot easier. So I think that's a difficult skill to teach. We try, and it's not even so much as our officers, the way they're interacting, it's the way that the other half is interpreting and receiving sometimes the discussions. As far as our interaction with the ACC, I will say and I would say this in private as well as in public, our experience, at least my experience with the ACC, has been positive. We've had some negative things come through there, obviously, but the way that the board asks, I think, some really good, valid questions when we go through the process, open to discussion, and I think from an agency standpoint, the way I look at it is a resource that we can use when a complaint comes in or a question as to how we did something or why we did something. We now have people that are regular folks that get an opportunity to take a look at it. Tom, we talked about it in one of the cases. I don't remember which one it was, but the guy on the street, the average guy, when they look at something and say, hey, I understand why the police officer did that, as opposed to, hey, I really don't get it. And I think our experience has been that you guys are the regular guy, and we appreciate that. And I realize that there is a lot of time and effort, a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to everybody that sits up there, and it is appreciated. And with the exception of that, Tommy had mentioned we do have one that will go to a trial board. It is scheduled for the end of February with some snow dates in March. And I believe the attorneys have it set up to take place down in Towson at this point. So other than that, I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
In the event, Chief, that folks might want to attend that, could you, when you find out the date and the exact location, would you let us know?
I will. That's all being handled by our attorneys. As far as the exact location in Towson, I believe it's an office building of some sort. And the parties that are going to be involved in that are all from outside of the area. They're traveling a little bit of a distance, so.
Can I ask a question? Why is that? And this, not the specifics of the case, but why would a Carroll County trial board be held outside of the jurisdiction? Is it a resource on?
All the parties agreed to do it because you have an administrative judge that's from down that way. I guess the FOP doesn't have a local office either.
You'll have the FOP attorney, you'll have our town attorney. There's also an additional attorney that we have involved in this one. Most of them, I believe both of them are coming out of Baltimore. As you said, the administrative judge, I'm not really 100% sure where they're coming from. And we also have the police officer that's required to sit on it who's coming from out of county as well.
Thank you.
Well, Chief, I'd like to thank you for bringing up an interesting point that we can maybe look at, and that's the generational gap, right? So maybe one of our things can be to find out the best ways to communicate to the younger generation, right, on how they perceive this stuff, right? Because we're seeing this from one perspective that's totally different, probably. So that's something I find a little bit fascinating that maybe needs some, okay, you were stopped. How would you see this? How would you handle this? How would you like this to be communicated? So we can generate some information on maybe better ways to do that, right? Because that is a great point.
I think a lot of it has to do with education, I guess, and I don't know that it could be done on a large scale. I tell my guys that, really our job is to be selling what we do on a daily basis, individual by individual, call by call, car stop by car stop. One of the things I find that's interesting is we do a Citizens Police Academy. And when we do our block on car stops, the feedback that we get from the folks involved, they're like, hey, wow, we're looking at this totally different. Now we understand why the officer goes through the routine that he does and the way he interacts with us and the questions he asks us during the course of the stop. And it's always an interesting learning curve that takes place. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I think there's definitely a difference. Look, I've got grandkids that we communicate different, so I think understanding that where they are in their thing, and a lot of them are texting, Facebook, all this kind of stuff. Their communication's much different than verbal, like we're used to. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to do more like what you're saying, engage that age group, the younger thing, and see, get the perspectives and see how to look at it. I think it's interesting.
But Chief Snyder, it kind of brings up an interesting question for me. And outside of the method of communication, are you finding that younger people are more suspicious of authority than maybe older people are, or skeptical of authority? I mean, what do you think?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think, first of all, the way that we are viewed. You know, I'm going to go out on a limb here and speak for most of the guys sitting here. When we were growing up, when we were younger, we, meaning the police, we were portrayed much differently than we are now. You know, growing up, I think back to the, you know, television shows that we used to watch. Cops were always the good guys. And then it changed, where arguably we were viewed as being sometimes worse than the people that are actually, you know, quote, the bad guys. I think there's a little bit of that that goes into that. And as I said, communication has changed. We have to view that from an organizational standpoint, in that things such as Facebook, Instagram, you know, all the various social media networks that are out there, you know, if that's how people communicate, then we got to be able to adjust to that. But at the end of the day, it's a skill that we'll have to develop. You know, it'll adapt, it'll change. I don't know all the answers to it, but for what it's worth.
My mother always said, there's two people you don't argue with, that's police officers and your priest. So,
And your mother.
well, of course, that's assumed you don't argue with them.
All right, thank you. Anything else before we move to Manchester?
Yes, sir. Totally agree with everything that's been said at the table, and I do agree with Mike. In our 40-plus years, it's always been a problem with traffic stops. That's probably one of the biggest complaints that used to come across the board. When I was in Baltimore, there was thousands of them. And you get some police are just very robotic, and that robotic appearance where they're strictly professional, they're straight to the point. Because to be frank, one of the most dangerous things a police officer does is a traffic stop. Because you never know who's on the other side of the car, behind the wheel. And there's some police, they're so robotic, they're so professional that it becomes, you know, comes across as them being ignorant or not caring or being rude. And you just have to cross that bridge as we get there. Who knows what the answer is? It's been going on for years. Bill, your end-of-year report, I think one of the biggest set of numbers for statistical purposes, because I believe we all do it, is our traffic enforcement and our calls for service. Because that's going to be the most key point number that, you know, the officers have come in contact with 1,000 people and only have 20 complaints, or whatever that number may be. And I think collectively it's, like Pete said, it's tens of thousands. So the numbers are probably pretty good all in all. So that's the two numbers that I would be presenting, is our call for service numbers and our traffic stops, traffic enforcement numbers, and anything else that we all think would be good.
You guys already have those, so you're not having to regenerate this stuff.
I keep mine
There you go.
every month. We all do UCR reporting, and I just have a set of numbers that I pay attention to. And they would be those numbers won't take you down a rabbit hole, because everybody can play with statistics, but I think they're the key numbers. And it would be collective across the county, because all the stops are being in the county. So that's numbers I would present. We do have one case coming down the pike, Tom, and I'm probably that one that pushed the limit last time. I apologize for that, you know, this case will be 5 months ahead of time.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think what the biggest problem was with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, and I'm for your input, when I did it in Baltimore, because I was an integrity lieutenant down there for a while, we had the practice where we had to wait for the court case to be adjudicated. There would be an internal affairs or a designee that would go into the court case,
Right.
just to make sure nothing more comes up.
And that was bumping up against the limit. And
Yeah.
I think we wanted to have some more information maybe, but we just didn't have the time. But we did get it resolved.
The case I have now, I mean, I'm gonna call the ball on it because I just found out, last week it's getting bumped up again, so now it's gonna be heard next year. So I'm just gonna be done with it because I'm pretty comfortable where I am with it. So I do apologize for that, though. But that's about it on the Manchester side. Oh, one thing, the outreach. Is it okay for us to attend when you get those dates if we feel we want to?
Absolutely.
Know what's being presented?
I would be strongly encouraged, yeah.
Yeah, we'd
Yes, sir.
appreciate it.
If you could let us know the dates.
Okay.
Right. No, we'd really appreciate that. I mean, what we're hoping to do is get this to be seen as more of a partnership instead of us versus you guys, right? Because really the way we see this role is to work with local departments to improve community policing. That's what it says.
Yeah.
So,
the
yeah,
first
we'd
one's-
love to be partnering with you, and so the citizen can see that.
Yep,
Yeah.
we appreciate that.
Thank you for that.
First one's in Hampstead, and that could impact you and I.
Right.
And I'm a member of that lodge anyway, so we'll probably go.
That's great. Thank you.
Of the American Legion Lodge at
Yes,
Hampstead?
Yes.
Yeah, the lady, Mary Ann, I think her name is, indicated that we'd have to get on their schedule, but she said she'd let us know that they want something in February.
Okay,
We're still
good.
waiting on when the date is.
Yep. Well, Dave, hopefully you and I can attend that, listen to it.
And if you could send Bethany those statistics that you have on the calls for service and traffic stops, that would be very much appreciated. We could get that into the report.
That should be easy for all of us.
And the thing for all of you officers, I mean, you know, if you could, it's a way to get community policing, right? Do more community policing. A lot of these people in these organizations are parents of these younger generations. And when they can see, you know, you guys engaging and then take that back to their homes, their families and say, look, here's what's going on and here's what is and what isn't. You know, so that would be helpful. That's great. I really appreciate you suggesting that. Something we didn't think about, you know, but that's great.
All right, thank you again. Okay, so the next agenda item, I sort of put it on here as a test to see if anybody wanted to utilize it. It's basically gives law enforcement some time if they want to bring up anything that's of importance to them, that they want to let the group know. Anything that you guys want to let us know, this is a kind of a free time for you to tell us what you think you want us to know. Nothing, I guess? Okay. Then we have number 11, other concerns and business. Anyone? Well, I got one thing I could put on here, and I just say that yesterday was a very important date in American history. A lot of people forget about it. It was December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And I was thinking about it, and yesterday was a Sunday. Pearl Harbor was attacked on a Sunday. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning. People were getting ready for church. People were spending some quality time with their families. Their defenses were down, and we were attacked, and a lot of people died. It was the worst attack since, after 9/11 was the only thing that was worse than that in American history. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that it's important for us, even though we're up here in a nice, safe place, to remain vigilant. And so I will leave everyone with a reminder that the crazies are still out there, especially for you guys. You never know when someone's going to want to do you harm, and it comes out of the blue very often, just like those two National Guardsmen down in D.C. Just comes out of the blue. So I would just encourage everyone here, both law enforcement and civilians, to be careful, be proactive, be vigilant, and be safe. So with that, do I have a
Motion to adjourn.
to adjourn?
Second.
Second. We are adjourned. Thank you.